Captain James Reyes stood on the bridge of the TSS Constellation, watching the stars stream past like luminous tears against the void. His ship was small by galactic standards, a mere frigate, barely 200 meters from bow to stern. But she was his, and he had sailed her through storms that would have broken lesser vessels.
The message on his display screen had been replaying in his mind for 3 hours now.
By order of the Dominion Eternal, all vessels are forbidden from entering the Verith system. Violators will be destroyed without warning. There are no exceptions.
Beneath the message was a timestamp, barely 12 hours old, and beneath that, a distress call. Weak, fragmented, desperate. This is the colony ship Aurora, 7,000 passengers, life support failing. Request immediate assistance. Coordinates follow.
The coordinates were in the Verath system, the system the Dominion had just declared forbidden.
"Captain," said Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, his first officer, "we're approaching the boundary. If we cross, we'll be in Dominion-controlled space. They'll know within minutes."
"I'm aware, Sarah. They have 17 battle cruisers in that sector alone. Each one could vaporize us in seconds." "I'm aware of that too." Chen hesitated. She had served with Reyes for 7 years, had followed him through pirate ambushes and diplomatic nightmares, and everything in between. She trusted him more than she trusted anyone in the galaxy. But this was different.
"James," she said quietly, using his first name for the first time in months, "there are 7,000 people on that ship. If we try to save them and fail, we don't just die. We give the Dominion an excuse to move against Earth. This could start a war."
Reyes turned to face her. He was not an imposing man. Average height, lean build, features that might have been called handsome if they weren't so weathered by years of hard service. But his eyes held something that made people stop and listen when he spoke.
"Sarah, the Dominion has been looking for an excuse to move against Earth since the day we made first contact. They've conquered 73 species. They've enslaved half the galaxy. The only reason they haven't come for us yet is that we're too far away and too poor to be worth the effort."
Then why give them a reason now? Because 7,000 people are dying, and we're the only ship close enough to help. Reyes looked back at the stars. The Dominion declared that system forbidden because they're testing a new weapon there, something they don't want anyone to see. The Aurora strayed into their space by accident, and instead of escorting them out, the Dominion attacked them, damaged their engines, crippled their life support, and left them to die slowly so there would be no witnesses. Chen's face went pale. "How do you know this?"
"Because I know how empires think. They don't declare systems forbidden to protect their citizens. They do it to hide their crimes." Reyes turned to the helm officer. "Lieutenant Torres, set a course for the Verath system. Maximum speed."
"Aye, Captain."
The Constellation crossed the boundary into Dominion space, and somewhere, in a command center on a world that humanity had never seen, an alarm began to sound.
Overlord Catharin of the Dominion Eternal watched the sensor readings with a mixture of confusion and contempt. "One ship?" His voice was a deep rumble, like stones grinding against each other. "They send one ship?"
The Dominion Command Center was a cathedral of power, a vast chamber carved from the heart of a conquered moon, its walls lined with displays showing the positions of every vessel in this sector of space. Catharin stood at its center, a towering figure whose armored hide could stop a plasma bolt.
"A human ship, Overlord," reported his tactical officer. "A frigate-class vessel. Minimal armament, minimal shielding. They crossed the boundary 47 minutes ago and are proceeding directly toward the Verath system."
"Toward the Aurora?"
"Yes, Overlord. They appear to be responding to the distress signal."
Catharin's massive head turned slightly, the movement conveying something that might have been amusement. "The signal we allowed to continue broadcasting specifically because no one would dare respond?"
"Yes, Overlord."
"Fascinating.
Xelthari studied the display, watching the tiny blue dot that represented the human vessel crawling towards its destination. Humans. I've read the intelligence reports. A young species, technologically primitive by our standards, confined to a small cluster of systems in a remote corner of the galaxy. They've been expanding for barely 2 centuries.
They are insignificant, Overlord. Their total fleet strength is less than 1/10 of what we deploy in this sector alone.
And yet, here they are. Xelthari's voice carried a note of genuine curiosity. One ship against an entire fleet, responding to a distress call from strangers, knowing they cannot possibly succeed. Why? The tactical officer hesitated. The Dominion did not traffic in such questions. The Dominion crushed resistance and absorbed the survivors. That was the natural order. That was how the galaxy worked.
Shall I order the fleet to intercept, Overlord?
Xelthari was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful.
No. Let them reach the Varath system. Let them see the Aurora. Let them understand the futility of their mission. A sound emerged from his throat, the Dominion equivalent of a chuckle. And then destroy them, but slowly. I want the humans to have time to regret their decision before they die.
The Aurora hung in space like a wounded animal, her lights flickering, her hull scarred by weapons fire. She had been a beautiful ship once, a colony vessel designed to carry 7,000 dreamers to a new world, a new life, a new beginning.
Now she was a tomb waiting to happen.
Captain Reyes studied the sensor readings as the constellation approached. The damage was worse than he had feared. The Aurora's main reactor was offline. Her backup systems were failing. Life support was operating at less than 20% capacity, and even that was deteriorating by the hour.
How long do they have? He asked.
Lieutenant Commander Chen ran the calculations, her face grim. At current rates of deterioration, approximately 18 hours before complete life support failure, less if anything else goes wrong.
And the Dominion fleet?
3 cruisers are changing course to intercept. ETA approximately 6 hours.
Reyes did the math in his head. 6 hours until the Dominion arrived. 18 hours until the colonists died. Even if he could somehow hold off the cruisers, an impossibility by any rational measure, he would need to figure out how to save 7,000 people with a ship designed to carry 200.
The numbers didn't work. They had never worked. He had known that from the moment he gave the order to cross the boundary.
But the numbers had never stopped him before. "Open a channel to the Aurora," he ordered.
The main view screen flickered to life, showing the face of a woman in her 60s. She was gray-haired, dignified, exhausted, the kind of person who had spent her life caring for others and now found herself unable to help those who needed her most.
"This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the colony ship Aurora," she said. "I don't know who you are or why you're here, but you need to leave. The Dominion has declared this system forbidden. If they find you here..."
Captain Vasquez, I'm James Reyes of the TSS Constellation. We received your distress signal, and we're here to help.
Vasquez's composure cracked slightly. "Help? Captain, there are 7,000 people on this ship. Your vessel couldn't carry a fraction of that number, and the Dominion is coming. You need to go, now, before they find you."
I'm not leaving without your passengers, Captain.
"That's impossible." "Then I'll make it possible." Reyes leaned forward. "How's your engineering section? Intact?" "Mostly, but our chief engineer is dead and most of the team is injured. We've been trying to repair the reactor, but..." "I'm sending my chief engineer over. Her name is Lieutenant Torres, and she's the best damn engineer in the fleet. While she works on your reactor, I need you to do something for me."
What?
Reyes smiled, a thin, tired smile that nonetheless carried a spark of defiance. "Start preparing your passengers for evacuation. All 7,000 of them."
Evacuation to where?
I'm working on that part.
Lieutenant Maria Torres was not having a good day.
She had spent the last 3 hours crawling through the bowels of the Aurora, patching systems that should have been scrapped decades ago, bypassing damage that would have stumped engineers with 10 times her resources. Her uniform was covered in coolant, and her hands were blistered from handling plasma conduits without proper shielding.
And she was making progress. "The main reactor is beyond repair," she reported through her communicator. "The Dominion weapons fried the core containment systems, but I think I can get the backup reactor online."
How long? Reyes's voice came back.
2 hours. Maybe 3?
You have one. Torres wanted to laugh. She wanted to cry. She wanted to throw her tools across the compartment and demand to know why she had followed this madman across the galaxy into certain death.
Instead, she said, "Understood, Captain. Torres out."
She turned to the 3 surviving Aurora engineers who had been assisting her, exhausted, frightened men and women who had been pushed past their limits hours ago.
"Okay," she said. "Change of plan. We're going to do something that every engineering textbook in the fleet says is impossible. We're going to cross-wire the backup reactor to the primary power grid without shutting down life support first."
One of the engineers, a young man named Martinez, stared at her. "That could cause a feedback loop. We could blow up the whole ship."
"That's the safe option, actually. The more likely outcome is that we just kill everyone slowly as the life support fails." Torres smiled grimly. "But here's the thing. If we follow standard procedures, everyone on this ship dies anyway. The Dominion made sure of that when they attacked. So our only chance, the only chance 7,000 people have, is to try something crazy and hope it works." She held out her hand. "Who's with me?" After a long moment, Martinez took her hand, then the others. Within minutes, they were working faster than Torres had ever seen anyone work, faster than should have been possible, driven by something beyond fear or duty.
Hope, Torres realized. They're running on hope.
She hoped it would be enough.
While Torres worked miracles on the Aurora, Captain Reyes was busy performing a different kind of magic. "Captain, the Dominion cruisers are 4 hours out," Chen reported. "They've launched fighters. First wave will reach us in 90 minutes.
Status of our weapons?
Minimal. We have enough missiles for maybe 3 salvos. Our point defense systems might take out some of the fighters, but once the cruisers are in range." She didn't need to finish the sentence. Once the cruisers were in range, the constellation would cease to exist. Her shields couldn't withstand a single broadside from a Dominion cruiser, let alone 3. "And the evacuation preparations?" "Captain Vasquez has the passengers organized, but we still don't have anywhere to put them." Reyes nodded slowly. He had known this moment would come, the moment when the impossible became undeniable, when the numbers finally caught up with him. He had been running toward it since he gave the order to cross the boundary. "Open a channel," he said. "Broadband, every frequency. I want everyone in this sector to hear this." Chen hesitated. "Sir, if we broadcast on all frequencies, the Dominion will know exactly where we are."
"They already know where we are. They've known since we crossed the boundary." Reyes stood, straightening his uniform. "Do it."
The communications officer activated the broadcast. Reyes took a breath. "This is Captain James Reyes of the Terran spaceship Constellation. I am currently in the Varath system, which the Dominion Eternal has declared forbidden space. I am here because a colony ship carrying 7,000 innocent civilians was attacked and left to die by Dominion forces. I am here because someone had to come. I am here because that is what humans do." He paused, letting his words carry across the void. His voice hardened. "But I am not a rational being. I am a human, and humans do not abandon each other. We do not leave our people to die in the dark. We do not surrender to tyrants, no matter how powerful they appear." To the Dominion Eternal, I know you're listening. I know you think this is amusing, one small ship against your mighty empire. You've conquered 73 species. You've never lost a war. You think you know how this story ends. Reyes leaned forward. You don't.
You have never faced humanity before. And I promise you this, whatever happens in the next 4 hours, you will remember this day. You will remember that one human captain in one insignificant ship looked at your empire and refused to be afraid. And you will wonder, in the years to come, how many more like me there are. How many humans are watching this broadcast right now, learning from my example? How many of them will follow in my footsteps?
He smiled, the smile of a man who had made peace with his fate.
Because that's the thing about humans. We inspire each other. And what I do today, someone else will do tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that, until eventually you run out of ships to send against us.
Captain James Reyes, signing off. See you on the other side. He cut the transmission. Chen was staring at him. So was every other officer on the bridge.
Sir, she said quietly, you just declared war on the Dominion.
No, Reyes replied. I just told them the war was already happening. They just didn't know it yet.
The broadcast reached across the sector in minutes. It was picked up by Dominion listening posts, by independent traders, by the observation satellites of a dozen neutral species. It was archived, analyzed, and transmitted further, a ripple spreading through the galaxy at the speed of light.
On the Dominion command ship, Overlord Catharon listened to Captain Reyes's words with growing disbelief.
He is defying us, the tactical officer reported unnecessarily. He knows he cannot win, and he is defying us publicly.
I heard him. Catharon's voice was cold. The amusement was gone now, replaced by something darker. I heard every word. Shall I order the fleet to accelerate?
No. Catharon studied the display, his mind racing. This changes nothing tactically. One frigate cannot hold off 3 cruisers. The humans will die, along with everyone on that colony ship. But he fell silent, thinking.
The Dominion had built its empire on fear. Species submitted because they knew resistance was futile. The mathematics of galactic power were clear. The Dominion had more ships, more soldiers, more resources than any force that could be arrayed against them. Fighting was pointless. Surrender was the only logical choice.
But this human was not being logical. He was throwing his life away for strangers, broadcasting his defiance for the galaxy to hear. And in doing so, he was introducing a variable that the Dominion's calculations had never accounted for.
Hope. That broadcast, Catharon said slowly. It's being relayed. Other species are watching.
Yes, Overlord. We've detected retransmission from at least 40 different sources.
They're watching to see what happens next.
Yes, Overlord.
Catharon understood now. The human captain wasn't trying to win the battle. He wasn't even trying to save the colonists. He was trying to send a message that would outlive him, that would spread through the galaxy like a virus, that would plant seeds of rebellion in the minds of every conquered species. And the only way to counter that message was to ensure that it failed completely, to crush the humans so thoroughly, so publicly, that no one would ever dare follow his example. Order the fleet to accelerate, Catharon commanded. I want those ships destroyed within the hour, and I want the destruction broadcast on every frequency. Let the galaxy see what happens to those who defy the Dominion Eternal.
The Dominion fighters arrived first.
27 interceptors, each one faster and more heavily armed than the Constellation, screaming out of the dark toward their target. Captain Reyes watched them approach on the tactical display, their formation perfect, their movements synchronized.
Point defense systems ready, Chen reported. Missile tubes loaded. Hold fire until they're in optimal range. Reyes's voice was calm. We only get one shot at this.
The fighters closed the distance. 10,000 kilometers. 5,000. 2,000.
Now.
The Constellation erupted in fire. Missiles streaked toward the incoming fighters as point defense cannons filled the space around the ship with a curtain of metal and energy. The leading fighters exploded, caught in the crossfire, but the rest scattered, evading the worst of the barrage.
6 fighters destroyed, the tactical officer reported. 21 remaining. They're making attack runs.
The first volley struck the Constellation's shields. The ship shuddered, alarms blaring across every system.
Another volley. Then another.
Shields at 40%. We're losing hull integrity on decks 3 and 4.
Reyes gripped the arms of his command chair, watching the fighters swarm around his ship like angry insects. The Constellation fought back, her guns blazing, her point defense systems working overtime, but for every fighter she destroyed, 2 more were pounding her shields.
Shields at 20%. Captain, we can't take much more of this.
Torres, Reyes said into his communicator. How much longer?
10 minutes, Captain. Maybe less.
You have 5.
I can't.
You have 5, Lieutenant. Make it happen.
The connection cut off. Reyes turned back to the tactical display, watching his ship die, 1 hit at a time.
Sir, Chen said quietly, the cruisers are entering the system. ETA 12 minutes.
Reyes nodded. 12 minutes. Torres needed 5. That left 7 minutes to hold off 3 Dominion cruisers with a ship that was already falling apart.
He had faced impossible odds before, but this was different. This was the end of the line.
Unless.
Chen, open a channel to the Aurora. I need to speak with Captain Vasquez.
You want me to do what? Captain Vasquez's face on the view screen was a mixture of exhaustion and disbelief.
I want you to overload your backup reactor, Reyes repeated. Once Torres gets it online, push it past safety limits, way past. Generate an electromagnetic pulse strong enough to disable everything in a 10,000-kilometer radius.
That will destroy my ship.
Yes, but it will also disable the Dominion fighters, and, if we're lucky, cause enough chaos to delay the cruisers.
And my passengers?
We'll have 5 minutes to get to escape pods before the EMP hits. Reyes leaned forward. I know it's not enough time to evacuate everyone. I know that hundreds, maybe thousands, won't make it, but it's the only chance we have.
Vasquez was silent for a long moment. Behind her, Reyes could see the faces of her bridge crew, frightened, exhausted, desperate for hope.
You're asking me to sacrifice some of my passengers to save the rest.
I'm asking you to make an impossible choice, the same choice I made when I crossed the boundary into this system. Reyes's voice softened. I'm not ordering you to do this, Captain. I'm asking, because I don't have any other options, and neither do you.
Vasquez closed her eyes. When she opened them, something had changed in her expression. The uncertainty was gone, replaced by resolve.
Tell your engineer to hurry, she said. I'll start the evacuation.
The next 5 minutes were the longest of Maria Torres's life.
She worked with hands that shook from exhaustion, making connections that defied every safety protocol she had ever learned. The backup reactor hummed to life, its power output climbing steadily toward the red line.
That's it, she said into her communicator. The reactor is online. But Captain, if we push it any harder...
Push it harder, Reyes ordered.
Sir, the containment systems aren't designed for this kind of output. We're looking at a catastrophic...
I know what we're looking at, Lieutenant. Do it anyway.
Torres looked at her fellow engineers. They looked back at her. 3 people who had been strangers a few hours ago and were now prepared to die together.
You heard the captain, she said. Let's make some noise.
They pushed the reactor and pushed it and kept pushing it until the readings went off the scale and the whole ship began to vibrate with barely contained energy.
On the bridge of the Constellation, Reyes watched the sensor readings climb.
EMP buildup at 60%, Chen reported. 70. 80.
Status of evacuation?
Captain Vasquez reports approximately 4,000 passengers in escape pods. Another 3,000 are still trying to reach the pod bays.
4,000 out of 7,000, just over half. It wasn't enough, but it was something.
Dominion cruisers entering weapons range in 2 minutes. the tactical officer announced.
2 minutes. The EMP needed at least 3 to reach full power.
All hands, Reyes announced over the ship-wide intercom. Prepare for impact. This is going to get rough.
The Dominion cruisers opened fire.
The first salvo struck the constellation like the fist of an angry god. Shields failed instantly. Hull breaches ripped through decks 2, 3, and 4. Half the bridge crew was thrown from their stations, and the lights flickered and died before emergency power kicked in.
Direct hits across all sections, Chen reported, blood streaming from a cut on her forehead. We've lost main power, weapons offline, life support failing.
Another salvo. The ship screamed as metal twisted and atmosphere vented into space.
Hull breach on Deck 7, Deck 8. We're losing structural integrity.
Reyes pulled himself back into his command chair. Through the cracked view screen, he could see the Dominion cruisers bearing down on them, massive, implacable, invincible.
How long until EMP is Ray?
30 seconds. Maybe less.
Another impact. The constellation lurched sideways, and Reyes heard the terrible sound of bulkheads collapsing somewhere below.
Captain, Chen said quietly, we're not going to make it.
Reyes looked at her, his first officer, his friend, the woman who had followed him across the galaxy into certain death because she believed in him.
Then let's make sure they remember us, he said.
He activated the ship-wide intercom for the last time.
All hands, this is the captain. It has been the greatest honor of my life to serve with you. Whatever happens in the next few seconds, know this. We did what was right. We stood up to tyranny. We refused to abandon people in need. And that is something no one can ever take from us.
He looked at the Dominion cruisers, now so close he could see the details of their hull plating.
To the Dominion Eternal, you may destroy us, but you cannot destroy what we represent. There will be others. There will always be others. And one day you will fall, not because of our weapons or our ships, but because of what we believe.
TSS Constellation, signing off.
He closed the shell. The Dominion cruisers fired again, and the EMP detonated. The electromagnetic pulse was not a weapon in any conventional sense. It carried no explosive payload, projected no physical force. It was simply energy, a massive, overwhelming burst of electromagnetic radiation that swept across the battlefield like a wave.
Every electronic system within 10,000 kilometers went dead.
The Dominion fighters, caught in the pulse, went dark. Their engines failed, their weapons went offline, their navigation systems ceased to function. They became nothing more than debris, tumbling helplessly through space.
The Dominion cruisers, larger and more heavily shielded, fared slightly better, but only slightly. Their weapon systems crashed, their sensors went blind, their engines sputtered and failed as power distribution systems overloaded.
And in the midst of the chaos, 4,000 escape pods drifted free from the dying Aurora.
On the bridge of the command cruiser, Overlord Catharon stared at the static-filled displays in disbelief.
What happened? EMP, Overlord, the tactical officer reported, his voice strained. The humans, they overloaded a reactor. The pulse disabled everything.
Including the human ships?
Yes, Overlord. The Constellation and the Aurora are both dead in space, but so are our fighters, and our weapons are offline.
Catharon felt something he had not experienced in centuries: uncertainty. The human captain had sacrificed his own ship to create chaos. He had thrown away his life to buy a few more minutes for the colonists.
And those few minutes might be enough.
Time until systems are restored.
Unknown. Overlord. The pulse damaged multiple systems. We're looking at hours of repair work.
Hours. The escape pods would be long gone by then, scattered across the system, impossible to track without sensors.
The human had won. Not the battle. The Constellation was destroyed, her crew dead or dying. Not the war.
The Dominion was still the most powerful force in the galaxy, and nothing had changed that fundamental reality. But the human had won something else, something that Xelthari, for all his centuries of experience, had never seen before. He had won a story.
The escape pods drifted in the dock.
4,000 survivors, colonists who had been prepared to die, who had resigned themselves to slow suffocation in the cold of space, clung to their tiny vessels and waited for rescue. Some of them prayed, others wept. A few simply stared out at the stars, unable to process what had happened.
They had been saved. Somehow, impossibly, they had been saved. Among the pods was one that had been launched from the Constellation rather than the Aurora, a battered vessel containing Lieutenant Maria Torres and the 3 engineers who had helped her save them all. Torres looked out at the debris field that had been 2 ships. The Aurora was a shattered hulk, her reactor core finally cooling after the catastrophic overload. The Constellation was worse, barely recognizable as a ship, her hull ripped open in a dozen places.
"Did anyone else make it?" Martinez asked quietly. Torres checked the pod's limited sensors. They detected other pods, dozens of them, but most were from the Aurora. Only a handful bore the signatures of Constellation crew members.
"Maybe a few," she said. "Captain Reyes ordered the crew to abandon ship just before the EMP went off. Some of them might have made it to the pods."
What about the captain?
Torres was silent for a long moment.
"I don't know," she said finally. "The bridge took direct hits. If he was still there when the cruisers opened fire."
She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to.
The survivors drifted in silence, waiting for whatever came next. Rescue came from an unexpected source. The Varanthi observer vessel Silent Witness had been stationed at the edge of the system, monitoring the Dominion's forbidden zone for any useful intelligence. When Captain Reyes's broadcast reached them, they had done what their orders required, recorded everything, and prepared to report back to their government. But Commander Xelthari, watching the battle unfold, made a different choice.
"Helm, set a course for the debris field."
Her first officer, a young Varanthi named Xelthari, stared at her. "Commander, our orders are to observe only. We are not to interfere."
"Our orders also prohibit us from entering Dominion space, and yet here we are." Xelthari's multiple eyes were fixed on the display, watching the escape pods drift in the dark. "There are thousands of survivors out there. The Dominion cruisers are disabled, but will recover soon. If we don't collect those pods now, they will be destroyed." This could be seen as an act of war against the Dominion. "Perhaps." Xelthari turned to face her crew. "But I watched that human captain sacrifice his ship to save strangers. I listened to his words, his belief that someone had to stand against tyranny, that refusing to act was the same as accepting evil. And I find myself wondering, what would he think of us if we sat here and did nothing?"
The bridge was silent.
"Commander," Xelthari said slowly, "if we do this, our careers are over. The Dominion will demand our heads." "Yes, they will." Xelthari smiled, a rare expression for her species. But the human was right about one thing. There will be others. What he did today, others will do tomorrow. And I want to be one of them.
She turned back to the helm. "Full speed to the debris field. Begin recovery operations immediately."
The story of Captain James Reyes spread through the galaxy like wildfire.
It was transmitted by traders and diplomats, whispered in slave quarters and shouted in resistance cells. It was analyzed by military strategists and debated by political theorists. It became a legend, a myth, a rallying cry. One ship, people said, one captain, against the entire Dominion. And he had won. Not in the way that empires won, through conquest and domination, but in a deeper way. He had proven that resistance was possible. He had shown that courage could triumph over fear. He had demonstrated that a single individual, acting on principle, could shake the foundations of tyranny.
On the Dominion homeworld, the High Council met in emergency session.
"This cannot be allowed to stand," declared Overlord Xelthari, the supreme commander of Dominion forces. "The humans' message is being disseminated across the galaxy. Conquered species are hearing it. They are beginning to ask questions."
"What questions?" asked another counselor.
Questions about our power, questions about our invincibility, questions about whether resistance might be possible after all. Xelthari's voice was heavy with concern. The human captain introduced an idea that our empire has spent 10,000 years suppressing. The idea that one individual can make a difference.
Then we must crush the idea, destroy the survivors, eliminate anyone who helped them. Make an example so terrible that no one ever dares to follow the human's path.
That was my initial recommendation, Xelthari admitted, but I am no longer certain it would work.
Explain.
The human captain anticipated this response. His message was designed for it. He explicitly stated that crushing him would only prove his point, that the Dominion rules through fear rather than legitimacy. If we retaliate with overwhelming force, we confirm everything he said about us.
"Then what do you suggest?" Xelthari was silent for a long moment.
I suggest we do nothing. Ignore the incident. Treat it as a minor border dispute resolved through standard means. Perhaps the story will fade.
But even as he spoke the words, Xelthari knew they were futile. The story would not fade. It was already too powerful, too compelling, too perfectly designed to spread.
The human captain had understood something that the Dominion had forgotten. Empires are built on stories, and the best story would always win in the end.
James Reyes woke in darkness.
For a long moment he didn't know where he was or how he had gotten there. The last thing he remembered was the bridge of the constellation breaking apart around him, the Dominion cruisers filling the view screen, the certainty of death.
And then, nothing.
He tried to move and found that his body barely responded. Everything hurt. His head was pounding. His lungs burned with every breath. But he was alive.
That seemed wrong somehow. He should have been dead.
Captain?
The voice was familiar. Torres, his chief engineer.
Torres, he croaked. What happened?
You're on the Varanthi vessel, Silent Witness. They picked up the escape pods after the battle. You were in one of the last ones launched. Barely made it off the bridge before the hull collapsed.
The constellation?
"Gone, sir. I'm sorry." Reyes closed his eyes. His ship, his home for 15 years. Gone.
The crew? 47 survivors out of 208. Lieutenant Commander Chen is alive. She's in surgery right now, but the doctors say she'll make it.
47, less than a quarter of his crew. The rest were dead because he had ordered them into an impossible situation.
And the colonists?
4,112 survivors from the Aurora. The rest, Torres's voice caught, they didn't make it to the pods in time.
4,000. He had saved 4,000 people. It wasn't 7,000, wasn't even close, but it was something.
The Dominion?
Their cruisers recovered and left the system. They haven't pursued us. The Varanthi are taking us to a neutral station where we can arrange transport back to Earth.
Reyes opened his eyes and stared at the ceiling of the medical bay. He should have felt something. Triumph, grief, exhaustion. Instead, he felt empty.
Did it matter? He asked quietly. Did any of it matter?
Torres was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft but certain.
Captain, your broadcast has been transmitted across the galaxy. Billions of beings have heard your words. Species that have been conquered by the Dominion for centuries are talking about resistance for the first time. The Varanthi, a neutral species that never takes sides, risked war to save us because of what you said.
She leaned closer.
You asked if it mattered. It mattered, sir. It mattered more than any battle anyone has ever fought. because you showed the galaxy that the Dominion can be defied, that courage is more powerful than fear, that one person standing up for what's right can change everything.
Reyes closed his eyes again. I just wanted to save those people.
You did, sir. And in the process, you may have started something that will save millions more.
The TSS Defiant was waiting for them at Nexus Station.
Captain Reyes, now wearing a borrowed uniform and walking with a limp that the doctor said might be permanent, stood at the viewport as the transport docked. The Defiant was a heavy cruiser, 3 times the size of the Constellation, bristling with weapons that would have been unthinkable 2 years ago.
She's part of the new fleet, explained Admiral Patricia Chen, Sarah Chen's aunt, and one of the most powerful figures in the Terran Space Navy. Since your broadcast, recruitment has tripled, production has quadrupled. Every human in the galaxy wants to be part of what you started.
What I started was a suicide mission that got most of my crew killed.
What you started was a revolution. Admiral Chen's voice was firm. The Dominion has controlled this galaxy for 10,000 years. They've conquered species, destroyed civilizations, crushed every hint of resistance. And in one broadcast, you undermined the foundation of their power.
I just told the truth. Sometimes that's all it takes. Chen turned to face him. Captain Reyes, I'm here to offer you command of the Defiant. You'll be leading the vanguard of our new fleet, pushing into Dominion space, making contact with resistance movements that have sprung up across the galaxy.
Reyes was silent for a long moment. He thought about his crew, the ones who had died, the ones who had survived. He thought about the colonists on the Aurora, the 3,000 who hadn't made it to the pods. He thought about the impossible choice he had made, the lives he had sacrificed, the message he had sent.
This isn't a war we can win, he said quietly. The Dominion has 1,000 ships for every one of ours. They have resources, technology, experience. By every rational measure, we should surrender.
But we won't, because you showed us that rationality isn't everything, Chen smiled. You showed us that sometimes the impossible is exactly what needs to be done.
Reyes looked out at the Defiant, at the stars beyond, at the galaxy that was watching to see what humanity would do next.
There'll be more battles, he said, more sacrifices, more people asking me to make impossible choices.
Yes. And I'll probably get more of my crew killed.
Probably.
And you still want me to command that ship?
Admiral Chen put her hand on his shoulder.
Captain Reyes, I don't want you to command that ship. Humanity needs you to command that ship. The galaxy needs you. She paused. You started something that can't be stopped. Now you have to see it through.
Reyes was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he straightened, ignoring the pain in his leg, the exhaustion in his bones, the weight of the dead on his shoulders.
When do we ship out?
The message reached Earth 3 months after the Battle of Varath. From the Resistance Coalition of Allied Species to the Government of Earth. Subject: Request for Formal Alliance. We are the oppressed peoples of 16 species, enslaved by the Dominion Eternal for centuries. We have long believed that resistance was impossible, that our only choice was submission or death. But the actions of Captain James Reyes have shown us another path. We have seen a human captain sacrifice his ship to save strangers. We have heard him declare that courage is more powerful than fear. We have watched the Dominion's invincible image crack for the first time in 10,000 years. Now we ask to stand with you, to fight beside you, to build something new on the ashes of tyranny.
The stars are watching. The galaxy is waiting. Will you lead us?
President Maria Santos read the message 3 times before she believed it. 16 species, billions of beings, scattered across hundreds of worlds, all asking Earth, a small, insignificant planet on the edge of the galaxy, to lead a rebellion against the greatest empire in history.
"This is insane," said Secretary of Defense James Morrison. "We're not ready for a war of this scale. Our fleet is still building. Our technology is decades behind the Dominions. We don't have the resources."
James, the president's voice was quiet but firm. Captain Reyes didn't have resources either. He had 1 frigate against 3 cruisers. He had 100 missiles against a fleet that could have destroyed entire planets. And yet, he won.
He didn't win. His ship was destroyed. Most of his crew died.
His ship was destroyed, yes, but his message survived. His example survived. The hope he gave to billions of beings across the galaxy, that survived. Santos looked at the message again. That's what he understood. That's why he did what he did. It was never about winning a battle.
She stood, moving to the window of her office. Outside, the capital city stretched to the horizon, millions of humans going about their lives, unaware that their planet was about to become the center of a galactic revolution.
"Send a reply to the coalition," she ordered. "Tell them we accept. Tell them we'll fight beside them no matter what it costs. Tell them that Earth will lead them, not because we're the strongest or the most advanced, but because we understand something the Dominion has forgotten."
What's that?
Santos turned to face her cabinet, her eyes burning with determination. That the greatest power in the universe isn't weapons or ships or armies. It's the willingness to stand up and say no, to refuse to accept that tyranny is inevitable, to believe that tomorrow can be better than today.
She smiled.
That's what Captain Reyes taught the galaxy, and that's what we're going to prove.
The war that followed was not a single conflict, but 1,000 smaller ones, skirmishes and raids and resistance operations scattered across the galaxy like sparks from a spreading fire. Captain Reyes led the vanguard, but he was not alone. Other captains, other commanders, other ordinary beings who had never imagined themselves as heroes found the courage to stand up and fight.
There was Commander Xelthari of the Varanthi, who had risked everything to save the survivors of the Varith battle. She now commanded a fleet of Allied vessels, striking at Dominion supply lines and disappearing before reinforcements could arrive.
There was Kelrak the Liberator, a former slave who had led an uprising on his homeworld and now organized resistance cells across a dozen systems. There was Elena Vasquez, the captain of the Aurora, who had survived the battle and dedicated her life to caring for refugees fleeing Dominion space. And there were countless others, beings whose names would never be recorded in history books, who fought and bled and died in the darkness between the stars, inspired by the words of one human captain who had refused to abandon strangers in need.
The Dominion, for all its power, could not suppress them all. Every time they crushed one resistance cell, 3 more appeared. Every time they made an example of a rebellious world, 10 more rose in defiance. The fear that had sustained their empire for millennia was crumbling, replaced by something they had never faced before.
Hote. The Battle of Nexus Prime was the largest engagement in galactic history. The Dominion, recognizing that half measures were no longer sufficient, had assembled every ship they could spare, over 2,000 vessels, the greatest fleet ever seen, commanded by Overlord Xelthari himself.
Opposing them was the Alliance, a ragtag collection of human ships, liberated fleets, and converted civilian vessels that had somehow grown into a force capable of challenging the Dominion's power.
Captain Reyes stood on the bridge of the Defiant, looking at the tactical display. The numbers were not in their favor. They were outgunned, outmanned, outmatched in every measurable way.
But the Alliance had something the Dominion did not, a cause worth dying for.
"All ships," Reyes said into the fleet-wide channel. "This is Captain Reyes. In a few moments, we will engage the largest enemy force in history. Many of us will not survive, but that is not what matters."
He paused, remembering another speech he had made, years ago, in a system called Varath.
What matters is that we are here, that we chose to fight, that when the Dominion told the galaxy to submit or die, we chose a third option, to stand up and say no.
Today, we fight for everyone who has ever been crushed by tyranny. We fight for the species that were conquered, the worlds that were destroyed, the billions of beings who lived and died under the Dominion's boot. We fight for the future, for a galaxy where no one has to be afraid.
He looked at the Dominion fleet, vast and terrible and seemingly invincible. The Dominion has ruled for 10,000 years. They believe they are eternal. They believe they cannot be defeated. Today, we prove them wrong.
All ships, attack!
The battle raged for hours.
Ships exploded in cascades of fire and light. Debris fields grew until they obscured entire sections of the battlefield. Casualties mounted on both sides, the mathematics of war consuming lives by the thousands. Overlord Xelthari watched from his command ship, directing the battle with the precision that had made him the most feared military commander in the galaxy. His forces were winning, slowly, steadily grinding down the Alliance fleet through sheer weight of numbers.
But something was wrong.
The Alliance wasn't breaking. Despite the losses, despite the impossible odds, they kept fighting. Every ship that fell was replaced by 2 more that surged forward. Every formation that collapsed reformed around surviving vessels. The humans and their allies were dying, but they were dying on their feet, facing their enemies, refusing to surrender.
They don't behave rationally, Xelthari murmured, watching an Alliance cruiser ram a Dominion battleship, both vessels exploding in a mutual suicide. They know they cannot win. Why do they keep fighting?
His tactical officer had no answer.
On the Defiant, Captain Reyes was bleeding from a dozen wounds. His ship was crippled, most of her weapons offline, her shields gone, her crew reduced by half. But she was still fighting.
Chen, he said to his first officer, the same Sarah Chen who had followed him into Varath, who had survived the Constellation's destruction, who had refused to leave his side through all the years of war that followed. How's it looking?
Chen studied the tactical display, her face grim. We've lost 60% of the fleet. The Dominion has lost maybe 20%. At this rate, they'll overwhelm us within the hour.
Then we need to change the rate.
How? Reyes looked at the display. At the heart of the Dominion formation, Xelthari's command ship sat like a spider in the center of its web, directing the battle, coordinating the fleet, maintaining the cohesion that made the Dominion invincible.
If we take out that ship, he said slowly, the Dominion loses its command structure. Their forces will fall into chaos. We might be able to exploit it.
Captain, that ship is protected by the heaviest concentration of firepower in the battle. Getting close to it would be
Suicide. I know. Reyes smiled, the same smile he had worn years ago on the bridge of the Constellation, facing impossible odds. But that's what we do, isn't it? We take the impossible missions. We fight the unwinnable battles. We sacrifice everything because someone has to.
Chen was silent for a moment. Then she nodded. All hands, Reyes announced. Prepare for combat acceleration. We're going in.
The Defiant charged toward the Dominion command ship, her remaining weapons blazing. Every Dominion ship in range opened fire on her. Missiles streaked toward her from all directions. Energy beams carved through her hull, tearing away sections of armor, killing crew members by the dozens. She was dying. Everyone aboard knew she was dying, but she kept going.
Shields failing, Chen reported. Hull breaches on multiple decks. We've lost main power.
Divert everything to engines. Get us closer.
Captain, the reactor is critical. If we push any harder,
then we push harder.
The Defiant screamed toward the command ship, trailing fire and debris. Around her, the battle continued. Alliance ships rushing to support her. Dominion vessels scrambling to stop her. Both sides recognizing that this moment would decide everything.
On the bridge of the command ship, Overlord Xelthari watched the human vessel approach with something approaching respect.
"He's doing it again," the Overlord said quietly. "The same thing he did at Vareth, sacrificing himself to change the battle."
Should we attempt evasive maneuvers, Overlord?
No, Xelthari's voice was calm. If we run, we show fear, and the Dominion does not fear humans.
Then what do we do?
Xelthari thought about the human captain, this small, fragile being who had defied the greatest empire in history, who had started a revolution with nothing but words, who had fought for years against impossible odds, never wavering, never surrendering.
"We face him," Xelthari said. "We face him and we destroy him, and we show the galaxy that the Dominion remains eternal."
The Defiant reached weapons range.
Both ships fired simultaneously. Epilogue: The Stars Remember.
In the aftermath of the Battle of Nexus Prime, historians would debate whether Captain James Reyes truly understood what he had accomplished.
His final attack succeeded. The Defiant's last missiles struck the Dominion command ship's reactor core, destroying both vessels in a cataclysmic explosion. Overlord Xelthari died alongside Captain Reyes, two enemies whose fates had been intertwined since that first fateful encounter in the Varoth system.
Without their commander, the Dominion fleet fell into chaos. The Alliance pressed their advantage, routing the enemy, capturing or destroying hundreds of vessels. It was the greatest military victory in the history of the galaxy, and it came at the cost of one human captain who had been willing to give everything.
The war continued for another decade, but the outcome was never in doubt after Nexus Prime. The Dominion crumbled, its empire fragmenting into dozens of successor states. The Alliance evolved into a new galactic government, not perfect, not without its own problems, but built on principles that Captain Reyes would have recognized.
Freedom, courage, the belief that every being had the right to determine their own destiny.
On the anniversary of the Battle of Nexus Prime, a memorial ceremony was held in the system where the battle had been fought. Ships from 100 species gathered to pay their respects, human and alien, former enemies, now united in remembrance of the man who had brought them together.
Admiral Sarah Chen, now retired, stood at the center of the ceremony. She was old now, her hair white, her movements slow, but her voice was still strong.
"I served with James Reyes for 30 years, she said. "I watched him defy an empire. I watched him sacrifice everything he had, his ship, his crew, his life, because he believed that some things were worth dying for."
She paused, looking out at the gathered fleet. He never wanted to be a hero. He just wanted to save people, to do what was right, to stand up when everyone else was sitting down. But in doing that, he became something more. He became a symbol, an inspiration, a proof that one person, acting on principle, could change the galaxy.
The stars took notice when James Reyes defied the Dominion. They're still noticing. Every time someone stands up against injustice, every time someone refuses to abandon people in need, every time someone chooses courage over fear, that's his legacy. That's what he gave us.
Chen smiled, remembering her captain, her friend, the man who had shown the galaxy what humanity was capable of.
The stars took notice, and they will never forget.
The end.